Welcome to a new episode of Gremlin Coaching. Today, I want to talk about a feeling many people are ashamed to admit: bitterness towards someone in their own family. I'm not talking about loud hatred. I'm not talking about imposing chaos or having a rude confrontation. I'm talking about that quiet, corrosive anger that hardens into resentment and sometimes into revenge fantasies. This is the kind of bitterness that doesn't scream, it waits. This is the rage of Electra, not explosive like the one of Achilles, but frozen in time. A rage sustained by silence, injustice, and the refusal of others to name what was done. And this episode, most probably and most importantly, is not about blame. It is about understanding what bitterness actually is, why it forms, and how emotional detachment done correctly can become an act of healing rather than withdrawal. In that sense, bitterness is not a character flaw, it's a signal. Bitterness does not mean that we are cruel, immature, or unforgiving. Psychologically, bitterness is an unresolved moral injury. The psychologist Jonathan Shea, who studied moral injuries in veterans, defined it as the one that occurs when there has been a betrayal of what's right by someone who holds power. In families, power doesn't have to be official. It can be emotional, it could be narrative-based, or it could be inherited. This means that within family dynamics, influence and control aren't always about formal authority, like being the parent who pays the bill or makes rules. Power can manifest subtly, shaping behavior, perceptions, and relationships in ways that feel invisible but are deeply controlling. So let's break down each type of power in relationship. The emotional one. A family member can hold emotional power over others without any formal position. Their moods, approval or disapproval, can dominate decisions and feelings in the household. Imagine a grandmother whose words carry weight. When she frowns or criticizes, everyone else feels guilty or small. No one officially gives her control, but her emotional reactions dictate how people behave. Hera, in Greek myths, often demonstrate emotional power. Her wrath and jealousy shape the actions of God and mortals alike, even without a formal decree. What's a narrative power? Power can be exercised by controlling the family story. Who is good? Who is bad? Who do we hold responsible? Or who is victimized? Whoever shapes the narrative often defines who is blamed and who is praised. Imagine a parent consistently telling everyone that so-and-so is the troublemaker. Well, this can make the child internalize guilt even if they did nothing wrong, which eventually, transform into deep shame. In King Lear, the way the daughters tell the story of their love, Goneril and Regan exaggerating their devotion, influences Lear's decisions, demonstrating narrative control as a form of power. What is inherited power? Well, some family members inherit power simply because of birth order, gender, or family tradition. So even if they never actively assert authority. Imagine an elder sibling who is assumed to know better, or who takes responsibility for younger siblings' actions. Their words are followed without question because tradition grants them authority. Esau and Jacob, birth order determined inheritance and blessing, giving one brother implicit power over the other despite personal actions. So, how may I summarize this? So, even without an official title, a family member can influence emotions, stories, and decisions. And these subtle forms of power can affect how people behave, feel about themselves, or even perceive reality. Recognizing this helps explain why family bitterness often exists even when official authority seems fair. So, when does bitterness form? Bitterness forms when our intentions are misread. This is the first one. Even when we act with sincerity or goodwill, our action can be perceived as selfish or self-serving. Offering advice, extending help, or simply sharing an opinion can be understood as criticism or provocation. And this gap between what we truly intended and how others perceive it creates a silent pain. Our heart knows the truth, but our environment refuses to see it. Prometheus steals fire to help humanity, but Zeus interprets this act as transgression and punishes him severely. Good intentions alone cannot protect us from perceived injustice. The second way that bitterness is created is when our character is questioned instead of our actions. Sometimes people judge us not for what we did, but for what they believe we are as a person. Criticism becomes personal, attacking our identity rather than a specific act. And this kind of injustice is deeply wounding because our worth cannot be fixed with apologies or logical explanations. In Les Misérables, Jean Valjean is condemned not only for a past theft, but for what people believe his character to be. He must constantly struggle to prove his worth and show that he is not defined by past mistakes. The third circumstance that creates bitterness is when we are asked explicitly or silently to shrink in order to protect someone else's fragile self-image. Sometimes, in order for someone else to feel safe or save face, we are expected to step back, hide our needs, or give up our space. Even when no words are spoken, the implicit message is clear. Make yourself smaller so I don't feel threatened. And this impulse to shrinking creates silent resentment because it denies our fundamental right to exist fully. Artemis sometimes must restrain her freedom and strength to navigate the expectations of patriarchal gods and mortals, showing the tension between autonomy and protecting others. So in summary, bitterness forms when our intentions are misread, our character is questioned instead of our actions, and when we are asked explicitly or silently to shrink in order to preserve someone else's fragile self-image. This is our Cassandra's curse, to see the truth clearly and yet be disbelieved, not because she is wrong, but because acknowledging her truth would disrupt the system. When this happens repeatedly, the psyche does something very intelligent. It refuses to move on until the injury is acknowledged. So bitterness in that sense is not poison. It is pain asking to be witnessed. As James Baldwin wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Let me say that again. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. The bitterness can evolve into a revenge fantasy, which is a misunderstood psychological response. Many people are disturbed by their own revenge thoughts. But revenge fantasies are rarely about wanting to harm someone. They usually mean, I want my reality to be acknowledged. I want the injustice to be named. I want the power imbalance corrected. In psychology, this is known as a corrective fantasy. The mind's attempt to resolve, to restore moral balance when the external world refuses to do so. We see this pattern all across myth and literature. Medea, betrayed by her husband Jason, imagines punishing him, his new bride, and even her children. Horrifying as it sounds, these thoughts aren't born of cruelty. They're her psyche's attempt to regain control and assert that her suffering matters. Hamlet spends most of Shakespeare's play planning revenge against Claudius. But his fantasy aren't just about killing. They're about re-establishing moral and familial order and ensuring that the wrong done to his father is acknowledged. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, descends into the underworld, stripped of power and imprisoned. Her journey is a symbolic revenge fantasy, a psychological rehearsal for reclaiming her agency and forcing the universe to recognize her worth, even when the world denies her justice. What these examples show us is that revenge fantasies are corrective, not destructive. They are the mind's way of saying, something was unfair and I need to feel the balance restored, even if only in thoughts. Once we understand this, we stop fearing our own anger and our own thoughts. And instead, we can listen to what they are truly asking for: recognition, respect, and the right to be acknowledged. So their rage is not born of cruelty, it is born of erasure. The psychoanalyst Adam Phillips once said, "People don't want revenge. They want the injury to make sense." And understanding this matters. Because once we realize revenge is really about recognition, we stop fearing our own thoughts and we start listening to what they are really asking for. So, you tell me, why does bitterness persist instead of resolving? Bitterness doesn't linger because we are stuck. It lingers because something essential was skipped. 3 main points are skipped. First, an unacknowledged injury. No one ever said to us, you were unfairly positioned in that situation, or you were scapegoated, or your presence became a trigger, not a wrongdoing. In family system theories, Murray Bowen noted that scapegoated individuals often carry the anxiety of the entire system, punished not for what they did, but for what they represent. Without acknowledgement, the psyche keeps the wound open, not out of weakness, but out of self-respect. The second one is emotional asymmetry. One person is allowed anger, withdrawal, and moral certainty, and the other is expected to be understanding, bigger, and silent. This is not maturity, it is emotional inequality. As Audre Lorde wrote, anger is an appropriate reaction to racist or discriminating attitude, as is fury when the actions arising from those attitudes do not change. And the same applies to family injustice. Silenced anger does not disappear, it ferments. Third way is the premature acceptance. When people try to accept before anger has been metabolized, bitterness does not dissolve. It mutates into cynicism, numbness, or quiet contempt. True detachment in that sense comes after anger is honored, not before. So you tell me, what is the healthy consequence? How can detachment actually happen without being withdrawal? Detachment without bitterness follows a very specific psychological and almost mythical sequence. Step 1 is to legitimize the anger. We say internally, I was treated unjustly in a way that attacked my character, and that justifies anger. Anger here is not aggression, it is self-respect activating. The therapist, Harriet Lerner, reminds us anger is a signal and one worth listening to. Step 2, containing the anger. Containment is not repression, it is sovereignty. It sounds like I feel rage and I choose dignity. I don't need to punish others to protect myself, or I don't need to prove what is already true. In Buddhist stories, this is the moment when the warrior lays down the sword, not because the enemy was right, but because the self no longer needs battle to exist. And this is power. The third step is to translate anger into boundaries. Anger's job is to clarify one question: what am I no longer available for? I'm not available for being misinterpreted. I'm no longer available for being triangulated. I'm not available anymore for being morally questioned for existing as I am. As Bell Hooks wrote, boundaries are a place for which to love both ourselves and others. When anger gains a function, bitterness dissolves, because bitterness is anger with no role. Step number 4. Release the fantasy of reversal. And this is the hardest one, the hardest step. It's letting go of the hope that they will understand and they will apologize or the system will correct itself. This is Orpheus turning away from Eurydice not because love is gone, but because clinging would keep both trapped in the underworld. It does feel like loss, but it's actually liberation. And the deepest truth here is this: I do not need others to see the truth for it to be real. Again, I do not need others to see the truth for it to be real. So you'll ask me, what does detachment without bitterness feels like? Well, it does not feel cold and it does not feel superior. It feels neutral. It feels grounded. It feels sad, but without resentment. And it feels clear without urgency to respond. You can think of the person and say, this is unfortunate. What she did is unfortunate, and it no longer defines me. The writer, Clarice Lispector, captured this state perfectly. I do not want to be cured of my wounds, she said, because they are part of who I am, but I no longer let them rule me. And this is emotional adulthood. It is very important to understand that you are not required to forgive, but you are allowed to release. Forgiveness is optional, but release is essential. Release means I am done carrying the emotional consequences of dynamics I did not create. Revenge imagines balance through reversal, whereas detachment creates balance through exit. As Viktor Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And detachment, real detachment, not withdrawal, lives in that space. As promised in my first episode, I will go from personal healing to collective healing and link them together. Because when one person in a family system chooses detachment without bitterness, something profound happens. They stop transmitting unprocessed anger. They stop modeling silent resentment as strength. And they demonstrate that dignity does not require domination. And this benefits families by interrupting cycles of scapegoating and triangulation. It benefits communities by replacing shame-based hierarchy with psychological maturity. And it benefits nations, especially those shaped by honor, comparison, and survival narrative, by teaching that worth does not require rivalry. The mythologist Joseph Campbell said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." When individuals metabolize anger instead of exporting it, families become less violent, communities become less reactive, and societies become less dependent on blame to regulate pain. Healing is never only personal. Every regulated nervous system quietly raises the ethical baseline of the world around it. And that is how detachment, done with integrity, becomes an act of collective repair. I really hope you like this episode. Please like it and share it with as many people around you as possible. Subscribe to the Gremlin Coaching and post in all your questions, your comments, everything you thought. I cannot wait to see you in our next episode. Be well, take care of yourself.